the littlest necromancer. Morality is a subjective thing. It seems beholden to the space in which it exists. In times of peace and plenty, morality is nuanced and reasoned, largely philosophical, staid. We have the luxury to explore whether something is truly immoral, or if that judgment is nothing more than a hangover from less enlightened times. But in times of strife, we have little room for the subtleties. When survival is paramount and we fear for our lives, morality becomes more flexible. Stealing is normally considered to be wrong, but when foreign soldiers have burned your farm to the ground and your family has nothing to eat, stealing food simply becomes a necessity. There is nothing more important than the survival of your children. And for me, no matter the time, there are some rules of society that just don't make any sense. Social taboos with only the thinnest veneer of logic over their acceptable surfaces. Perhaps it's because I have broken so many of those taboos that they seem sad to me now. Growing up on a barely fertile patch of land on the border of Lithuania, a child learns about the cycle of life very early. I vividly remember the first spring I was big enough and old enough to help with the lambing. I hadn't yet been taught about the mysteries of birth, and was only dimly aware of how I myself had come into existence. When I saw the limp yellow lamb dangling from its mother's grotesquely distended birth canal, the strangest feeling came over me. It was as though I were seeing something that I shouldn't, like my eyes had been opened to some great secret of the universe that should have stayed hidden. 3 lambs were stillborn that year, and I didn't understand it. I laid one of the stained, woolly corpses in my lap and stroked it gently, tracing the nubs and whorls of baby fleece with my fingers. I marveled at how perfect and complete it was, yet how utterly devoid of life. "Mamite," I said to my mother, "why is the lamb not alive?" "Because God decided it should not be," she replied, the shape of her mouth at once hard and soft. "Now go hang it in the shed for your brother to skin." I was not satisfied with that answer. She hadn't explained to me the how of the matter, and that was wrong. But I did what I was told. I tied rough twine around its tiny, perfect hooves, then hung it from the iron hook in the shed. When my elder brother skinned it, I peered through the gaps in the wooden slats, watching his sharp, shining knife reveal the wonderful complexity of muscles and sinews hidden beneath. And thus began my love affair with death. Insects were the easiest to hide, and the most simple of all the dead things I sought out. One day, hunting the fat brown spiders that dwelt beneath our house, I found a little tin box buried in the dirt. I kept my dead prizes in it, hidden away from everyone else. I would pick apart the bodies of flies and cockroaches, holding them up before my sharp child's eyes, studying their oil-slick membranes and dusty chitin. Sharp, hooked feet and fine-haired legs thrilled my skin when I touched them. I was filled with that same wondrously forbidden feeling that flooded through me when I'd first seen death. And when I focused on that feeling, pushing it into the front of my mind, when I imagined it dancing down and through my fingers like flame across a gunpowder fuse, something terrible and magical happened. Those insect corpses would move. At first it was the barest twitch of an antenna, or the spasming kick of a single leg, but as I spent more and more time refining and feeding that flashfire feeling, it became something much more powerful. Houseflies would tilt their multifaceted heads, then skitter an inch on their 3 legs before falling over sideways, the spark of unlife extinguished. I kept my secret to myself, not daring to show my brothers or my mother. But when spiders and crickets were no longer enough, well, I was forced to become bolder. I had to be brave to get the things that I so desperately craved. The mouse had been poisoned. My father had created a foul toxin of his own concoction, which he left in the corners of the cellar, the evil little pellets mixed with irresistible molasses and corn. This was to my advantage. Poison didn't mangle and maim like the steel traps used by families far wealthier than ours. In the dusty gray half-light of the cellar, I sat on a sack of oats and cradled the stiff mouse in my hands, gently stroking the spiked fur smooth. Came easily now, the feeling. It burned through me and flowed into the tiny corpse, causing its whiskers and paws to twitch erratically. I could feel the strong little muscles of its legs, could sense new and unfamiliar organs inside it like nothing my insect pets possessed. It took many tries to make it walk, pinching this muscle here and tugging that tendon there, but with the persistence born of obsession, I finally managed to make my latest acquisition creep a few halting steps forward on the earthen floor. From mice, I moved on to rats, relishing the greater power afforded by their larger bodies. I made them skitter and chitter and squeezed hideous snarls from their dead, dry throats as their yellow teeth clacked and snapped. But my secret was becoming too big to stay hidden forever. When I was caught, I was hauled up from the cellar by my hair, with a decaying rat clutched in each grubby fist, my squeals of protest assaulting the ears of my mother. Her calloused backhand stung my face, and the metallic tang of blood that filled my mouth abruptly silenced my howling.
"Disgusting girl,"
she told me, dragging me towards the roaring fireplace.
"You should not play with such disgusting things."
Her mouth twisted with revulsion. She prized open my hands and flung my precious pets into the flames. Their dry bodies combusted instantly, fur blooming blue-green from the chemicals used in the poison. The stink of burning hair was vile, far worse than the thick velvet smell of rot I had come to cherish. But she had not seen me animating. She had not glimpsed the power I commanded. When the door to the cellar had banged open, my thread of control had been severed and the moldering corpses stilled immediately. That curious spark within them abruptly doused. That night, curled up in the bed I shared with my brothers, I wept silent tears, my fists stopping my mouth. My undead babies were gone forever, their second life stolen, and I mourned them as befit a mother. I consoled myself with the realization that there would always be more dead things. That much was an absolute certainty, but I would have to be far more careful. When my eldest brother was enlisted to fight in the War of Independence, I knew that I wouldn't see him again. It was as though I could smell the intimate scent of death upon him already. His duffel slung over one shoulder, he waved cheerfully as he rode my father's bicycle down the rutted road, away from the house. His poorly penned letters came for 3 months, then abruptly stopped. The hole they left was inevitably filled by a more official letter informing us that he had been killed fighting on the front. Each of my family members grieved in their own way, dancing around the hard truths of death, coming to terms with his loss and their own, but I did not. Oh, I raged. I demanded to know why his body hadn't been sent home to us, why he had been put in some hole dug in foreign soil so far from home. For months, I scrounged and hoarded food, planning to run away from the farm. I would find Peter's body and raise it from the dirt so that he could begin his second life. When I finally did leave, my stolen bicycle was slowed by the muddy ruts in the same road where I had last seen my brother, and I realized that I had no idea where I was going. A smoother road near the Polish border extended for miles in both directions, identical and not a signpost in sight. In that moment of indecision, I realized what it meant to be a child, and I discovered that the world was much, much bigger than I had ever imagined. Tired and forlorn, I returned to the bed where my remaining brothers snored unaware. I was too weary even to cry. The day that the soldiers came to our village was marked by columns of smoke in the distance. Being so close to the border, we had always feared that enemy soldiers might break through, but I don't think any of us really believed it would happen. When they arrived, most of the townsfolk had gathered near the church, the men forming a motley militia that stank of desperation and duty, wielding axes, pitchforks, and old hunting rifles. Inside the small church, the women and children hid, some of the young ones peering out through the windows while being scolded to get down and hide. What my father and his ragtag group of men thought they could achieve, I'm not sure. When the Soviet soldiers opened fire, they were quickly and predictably overwhelmed. My now eldest brother, so briefly gifted that rank by Peter's death, dropped to the dirt. I remember the shape of his mouth as he fell, a perfect round O of surprise, as blood spurted from the hole in his neck. 5 others fell before our brave little militia dropped their peasant weapons and put their hands in the air. Shouting in broken Lithuanian, the uniformed soldiers told the men to get on their knees, while I stared on from the church, spellbound by the carnage. My father argued. The fist of the Soviet marauder crushed his nose flat, the spray of blood bright and sudden in the clear morning air. I should have felt terror, but I didn't. The sight of fresh death had stirred up that strange furnace inside me, and the burn roared inside my head, more powerful than ever before. The soldiers did not see my dead brother rise behind them, awkwardly hefting his axe. But when his sharpened blade thwacked deep into the skull of their officer, killing him outright, all hell broke loose. Bullets thudded into him, but I kept him walking. Before the hail of gunfire could knock him to the ground, my brother's axe struck again, taking another of the enemy soldiers down with him. That fallen soldier promptly gained his feet under my control and began shooting his living companions with a dispassionate steadiness that only the dead truly possess. It took minutes for them all to die, and mere seconds for me to raise them up again, my head ablaze with the ecstatic hellfire that animated them. "I saved you," I called to my father as I flew out of the church and into his slow and startled embrace. "It was me. I made the dead men walk. I made them kill each other." The fire had dimmed inside me, and I let the soldiers fall. They were no longer needed.
I don't understand what you are saying,
he said, mopping his bloody nose with a handkerchief. And so I showed him. I showed all of the townsfolk how I could control the dead. I made the bullet-riddled soldiers rise again, marching them to form ghastly ranks of grinning corpses, so that my kith and kin would realize just how amazing my powers were. But they did not find my gift amazing at all. My own dear father wrapped his calloused hands around my neck, screaming that I was an abomination, that I was a child of hell, and I knew with a dreadful certainty that he intended to squeeze the life out of me. I could smell my death coming. If only they had let me explain. If only they had stopped running and screaming after the dead men shot my father and allowed me to squirm free, but that doesn't truly matter. Once all the townsfolk had been anointed in the flames of their second lives, they all obeyed me without question. People are so much more agreeable when they are dead. I lived in the village for several more years. learning how to keep the flesh of my children fresh, how best to stop them falling into rot and ruin. And their second existence was far kinder than their first, I feel. None starved, no one fought, no baby could be lost to bad harvests or disease, no brothers to war. Even the fields and forests flourished beneath the persistent ministrations of all those careful gray hands. Game returned to the woods surrounding the village, now bright with bird song. I took care of my huge family, and we'd all took care of our home. I was a good mommy at day, and I helped my children survive. When I had learned all I could, and when I could no longer puppet bodies that were too worn out to work, I let their second lives come to a gentle end, walking them all into the good earth of a mass grave they dug with their own dear hands. Their bones lie tangled in the beautiful woods of my homeland, and sometimes I still feel the faintest spark flowing through thousands of miles of ground that now separate us. It hasn't been an easy life, keeping my secret from others, resisting the beckoning warmth of the unholy fire that burns within me. And I found that I don't need to wait. It is so much easier just to remove first lives, carefully, gently, without marking the flesh. And then there is more time to love them until they grow too pale and dry to puppet anymore. But my days have become haunted by a perfume rising from my own skin, the same one that trailed from my brother as he rode his bicycle off to war. Yes, the scent of my old familiar companion is upon me now. I can feel the delicate shroud of death descending to brush my shoulders, and I know that unless I find a successor, there will be no second life for me. So now, I must ask, when you read this story, did you feel something stir inside you? If a strange, unnatural heat suffuses your heart in this moment, then grow still. Concentrate. Let it spread inside your chest, that fire that smolders and aches to be put inside another creature, to sear those quiescent pathways of nerve and bone, to give them a new and better life. If you know what I'm talking about, if you feel the flame that I must know, I can teach you things that will change your life forever, and you can give me my second life. I will be the best grandmother any child could